Is it me or is it cold in here?
It's cold.
Okay, I thought so.
We go from cold to hot, but there's no in between.
There's no in between.
Cold is better than hot.
It is,
When
dear.
it's hot, it's really hot.
Yeah.
Debbie, do you need that mic bent like that?
Do you need it unbent?
We can do that.
Not like that? That's fine.
All right, Ms. Nancy, you may continue if you wish.
I'm going to put up what's called Defense Exhibit 40. Specifically addressing, told you Dr. Huey and Dr. Browning described mania as being very obvious and very extreme. Can you address what the actual DSM definition of mania is and how it relates to that?
Your Honor, I object to questions been asked and answered.
Ms. Sampson, has this been asked before?
She has not gone through the definition. Well, she has not gone through the definition as it applies to Dr. Huey and Dr. Browning's description of the symptoms. So,
for right now, I'm going to overrule the objection, and the jury will make a determination. I'm going to let you go through those symptoms that's listed up there. Go ahead.
Okay, so there are 7 symptoms, and out of those 7 symptoms, an individual must have 3, at least 3 or more. So they do not have to have all 7. They need only have 3, and the manic episode only needs to occur for 1 week. So some of the symptoms are grandiosity. This is when you're thinking that you have either a special power that you don't have, or your sense of abilities, your sense of esteem, if you will, is overly inflated. Decreased need for sleep. That goes to the being able to sleep for just 2, 3, 4 hours and feel completely energized, not tired the next day. You see the overly talkative. So this is individuals that, a good example is if somebody tends to keep more to themselves, tend to be more shy during a manic episode, for example, they may be more talkative. And I say may because, again, we're only looking for 3 out of the 7. They may also be, you may also see them talking about things that are much more personal than they usually talk. If they are individuals that are more private about their life, you will see them talking about diverging information that they usually would not share with other individuals, for example, at work or socially. The racing thoughts, that's one that we tend to see often in individuals presenting at the hospital. But it does not need to be present to meet diagnosis for bipolar disorder. Racing thoughts are when you are experiencing multiple thoughts coming at once. And so what happens, and this one you do see when it's present, is when the individual is talking and they're trying to talk out what they're thinking about, because it's so many different thoughts and they do not necessarily have to do with the same content. Their thinking will just seem to be all over the place. Their speech will seem to be all over the place. So that one is one that we do tend to observe, and that one is one that typically we do tend to see in the hospital. But again, it's only one of the symptoms that need not be present. Distractibility, I think this is another one where you're just not able to focus on things because you're doing so many things, so much action. Number 6 is it says agitation or doing a lot of things or tasks all at once. What I should also have put on there for agitation or doing a lot of tasks all at once is that within that one, what we also have is overly focused on an activity. So this is where the hyperreligiosity or hypersexuality actually falls under number 6, where the individual will be overly focused on whatever it is that they are doing. Number 7, it can be. It doesn't always involve high-risk activities, but sometimes you do see individuals that are, for example, gambling. They are spending more money that's beyond their means, high-risk taking activities. They are leaving one job, moving to another one without having something lined up, and then being unemployed for a year, for example, in this case. But again, these are 7. You only need to have 3, and they only need to be present for a week. And it can be any combination of the 3. So I think one can see by looking at these 7 that some of these symptoms are not readily observable, which is why the research informs us that bipolar disorder is so often missed, because it does not always present as Dr. Huey and Dr. Browning testified.
Objection, Your Honor. This witness has no firsthand knowledge, I assume, because she's sequestered, of what another witness testified to.
Sustained. Next question.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm going to show you what I've marked as Defense Exhibit 41, 42, 43 that I previously shown the district attorney, and ask you what those are pages from.
These are patients. These are pages from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. I think these are from the 5th edition. And they are, the DSM is the manual that we use to diagnose.
May I get this back? And do these show exactly where the definition for delusions appear in the DSM?
It does.
Your Honor, I would offer into evidence Defendant's Exhibit 1, Defendant's Exhibit 2, 41, 42, and 43.
Any objection to 41, 42, and 43?
Beyond the scope of rebuttal, I think is the state's only objection.
All right. I'm going to give both sides some latitude. Overruled. Go ahead and present 41, 42, and 43 if you wish.
Looking at Exhibit 41, page 924 from the index, where do the definitions for delusions appear in the DSM?
They appear under delusional disorder. That is where they are explained. And so they are really captured between pages 87 and 93 or so.
And
you can see the different types: erotomanic, grandiose, jealous type, non-bizarre.
and that is in the section on psychotic disorders?
That is correct.
And then within that section, there's a section on delusional disorders, page 90 and 91, that goes into more detail of the definitions.
Right. That is where we obtain the diagnosis for whether or not somebody is actually experiencing a delusion. You can also look at the criteria and see if the person meets criteria for a specific delusional disorder. But that is the only place in the DSM where we actually can look at and see if the person actually is experiencing delusions. Not necessarily delusional disorder, but delusions. And delusions can be experienced, obviously, in delusional disorder. But they can also be experienced in other illnesses like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. Sometimes people with Alzheimer's disease get to the point where they experience some delusions. And major depressive disorder, sometimes if the depression gets really, really severe, they can experience delusions. So delusions are defined in the DSM under delusional disorder, but they are basically a piece under the umbrella of psychotic disorders. It is a type of psychosis, and that type of psychosis can be experienced in different diagnoses throughout the DSM, including bipolar.
Delusions in bipolar or in schizophrenia or in major depressive disorder in each of the other sections?
That is correct. And if you look at DSM and you look at bipolar disorder, it actually does address how delusions can be experienced, and how delusions are, and hallucinations also tend to be sort of, oftentimes can be congruent, or they can go along with the mood.
But do they redefine delusion in each of these other sections?
No, not redefined, because we only have one definition, and that definition is provided under delusional disorder.
So when the definition of mania under bipolar refers to psychotic features, is that the only place to look for what that means? Earlier section.
For psychotic features, you would be looking at things, in this case, under delusional disorder, and then you would also be looking under, in this case, you would also be looking under schizophrenia for the part that talks about hallucinations. It doesn't mean you have schizophrenia, but that particular diagnosis defines what a hallucination may look like.
Now, if Dr. Huey testified that you cannot be bipolar and have delusional disorder, Are you saying that Hemy Neuman has
I
delusional
object.
disorder?
That is a mischaracterization of what the testimony was.
Sustain, rephrase that question. If the jury makes the ultimate decision on what they did and did not hear during the course of the trial, let's rephrase that question.
Are you saying that Hemy Neuman has delusional disorder?
Now, I am saying he has bipolar disorder that had delusions. That's different from having bipolar disorder and a purely delusional disorder.
Next question.
If there was testimony that mania does not mean that you get a lot done, is that consistent with your experience and with the definitions in the DSM?
It is inconsistent. There is nothing in the DSM that says that when you are manic, you cannot accomplish a lot. There's nothing on there. And certainly in my experience in evaluating and treating people with bipolar disorder, as I alluded to or testified earlier, individuals can be very high achieving, well educated, high achieving, demanding careers like attorneys, and they can have bipolar disorder, and they can do quite a bit, particularly during manic episodes. Not so much during depressive episodes, clearly, but during manic episodes.
If there is testimony that Hemy Neuman's actions were methodical and deliberate, and that that is inconsistent with mania, is that true?
Objection asked and answered.
Sustain. Next question.
At the time of the shooting, what were Hemy's primary symptoms?
Objection asked and answered.
Sustain. Let's move on. Counsel, you may ask questions that have not been put before this jury before.
Your Honor, I think that responds to the testimony of the state's rebuttal witnesses.
So what did you not understand when I said sustain?
Yes, Your Honor.
You want me to say it again?
No, Your Honor.
Move on, please.
Is it common for someone with bipolar disease to never be hospitalized during their life?
It is. It's very common. It's only a very small number of subset of individuals with bipolar disorder that we ever see in the hospital. And those are the ones that are presenting with the symptoms that are so impairing, that are so observable, if you will, that lead them in the hospital. But that's only a small subset. If we were to hospitalize everybody with bipolar disorder, we would not have enough beds.
Talking about the demons and the angels, Dr. Browning testified that hallucinations are always of normal-sized people, and that he felt that was inconsistent with him.
Your Honor, I object to the form of the question, informing the witness as to what somebody else said. That's not a hypothetical. That's not a proper question. I object.
Sustain.
Would you agree that hallucinations are normal-sized people as opposed to oversized or undersized?
No, they can be larger and they can be smaller.
In Hemy's description, is his description in terms of size consistent with with what you can see in a hallucination?
It is. He experienced it as something bigger than him, hovering over him because of his size and because of the what we call form dimension. It can appear bigger. It does not necessarily in any way mean that it's malingered or faked.
So when you say form dimension, does that relate to how he was positioned? In other words, if he was sitting or standing, or what?
Correct. When I mean form dimension, I mean if you are small and somebody is standing over you, even if they are normal size, they're going to appear bigger because of how you're looking up or how you're looking at them. It's that form dimension. So it's going to appear bigger than it is. His report to me of what the demon and the angel look like was not inconsistent with what a real hallucination may look like.
And in terms of tactile hallucinations, or whether or not you can touch or feel a hallucination, is that something that you can see in hallucinations?
No, I mean, can you see it in terms of can it be real?
Can you experience a hallucination that involves being able to feel or touch the object hallucinated?
Yes, we do see, they're called tactile hallucinations. They actually have a name. And yes, we do see them. And it is not necessarily in somebody with what we call organicity. Sometimes you do see them in other types of psychosis, for example, in this case.
You reviewed, if Hemy told Dr. Crawford that the angel told him to kill Rusty as part of his description, and you've seen the whole tape, and then told described in another time that the angel told him to protect the children and that he concluded he had to kill Rusty. Are those significant differences in terms of giving an opinion?
They are not, because his perception is the same. And that was the mission that he was put on was to kill Mr. Sneiderman. So whether he says, it told me to protect, or whether it said, it told me to kill, the interpretation is the same. He was told to kill. So they're not, I don't see them as inconsistent.
Would you agree that hallucinations cannot involve vague statements or be indirect?
No, I would not agree. And I think if an individual is reporting experiencing a hallucination or a delusion that is very direct, for example, go rob a bank, and here's how you're going to do it, and they do it exactly like that, and they rob a bank, that's a big red flag for malingering, for faking. It's the same thing here. What I'm actually expecting with a delusion is for there to be a lot of vagueness, for there to be it's being perceived through somebody that has lost touch with reality. And so they are going to see things in ways that are not necessarily going to make sense and that are not going to have logic to them. But they can be very organized, they can be very methodical, but I'm not expecting them definitely to say, here is what I was told to do line by line. If Mr. Neuman had told me that actually in this case, that would be an indication of malingering. And I did not see that. That did not happen in this case.
The idea that or is it true that you can never forget details of a traumatic event or an important event?
That is completely incorrect. And research clearly informs us of that with traumatic events, there are actually, if we look at the definition, post-traumatic stress disorder, actually, one of the symptoms is specifically the inability to remember some important part of the event. And it is for that reason, because during a traumatic event, one of the defense mechanisms that we human beings use is we sort of block out stuff and so we don't remember it, so we're not re-traumatized. So looking at the PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder definition on the DSM form informs us that it's actually a common presentation of individuals that experience trauma, where they may not exactly be able to recall specific, really important pieces of what happened during that traumatic event.
If Hemy told Dr. Huey and Dr. Browning that he and Andrea had sex a half dozen times, given what he told Melanie White, does that cause you to question your opinion or to question whether or not he's malingering?
It does not. When I saw Mr. Neuman back in 2011, versus when I saw him now, interviewed him now, there was a lot of lack of clarity for him, a lot of confusion, particularly in 2011, in terms of what type of sex they had when, whether they had he and Andrew Sneiderman had sexual intercourse, or whether he had fantasized about it. So there was lots of confusion. This year, there was more clarity in his report to me of being able to say, yes, I know that we did have sexual intercourse, at least once. So no, that would not, I wouldn't see that as malingering.
And is there anything about the definition of erotomania that requires that the person that you are focused on be unwilling? In other words, that it be stalking or that it be spending time with a person against their will?
No, there is nothing about the definition or the diagnosis of an erotomatic delusion that is qualified by the other person's experience or response. Nothing. It all has to do with the individual that's experiencing it.
Given that Hemy did not attempt to call the police or call DFACS or use some other method, can you use logic to predict how someone will respond to
Your
a
Honor,
delusion?
I object. Asked and answered, not proper, so rebuttal.
Sustained. Next
Dr.
question.
Flores, how likely is it to fake or malinger 3 separate tests specifically for malingering?
Objection, asked and answered, not so rebuttal.
Sustained, the jury make a determination also on what they have and have not heard during the course of the trial. I'm going to sustain that objection.
If you were able to malinger or fake the test, if you somehow had the proper answers, would the response you get be consistent with what you saw?
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered.
I have not asked this before, and it responds to
Also not so rebuttal.
Sustained. Next question.
Is it ethical to prescribe medication if you believe it is inappropriate?
Objection.
You asking her, does she prescribe medication? Hold on for a second. Do you prescribe medication?
No, I treat individuals who take
Well, I know
medication.
you do that, but that's different. She asked you, I'm going to sustain that objection.
Hypothetically, if you had a patient who was presently taking Depakote for bipolar disorder and you had been treating them for a period of time and you felt that they did not have bipolar disorder or didn't benefit from the medication, and then you contacted the doctor and the doctor told you, well, I don't think he has bipolar either, but I'm continuing to give the medication, how would you be obligated to respond to that?
Insofar as I followed the question, I object to its relevance and its application to this witness, given her degree of her expertise in psychology, not psychiatry.
I'm going to sustain that objection. Next question.
Looking at the jail intake records, if Hemy did not admit to delusions or hallucinations, is that inconsistent with your diagnosis?
No, it is not. He did not know that he was suffering from a delusion when he was arrested, and he had not experienced a hallucination since September. So he was actually responding truthfully that he was not experiencing hallucinations on the day he was arrested and taken into intake.
Did he disclose the prior suicide attempts?
Yes, he did. It's in the documents.
If Hemy disclosed he was considering suicide to a doctor at the jail, and then they searched his room and they actually found 5 contraband razors, would that be an indication of depression?
Objection, Your Honor, that's speculation.
Counselor, how should we answer that question? I heard the question. I'm trying to figure out how is Dr. Flores going to answer that question that you just asked her.
I think that would...
Be what? Go ahead, I'm listening.
I think that she can... That would be an indicator of the symptoms you would expect for that condition.
I'm going to say that. Bless you. Sustain. You need a Kleenex for the sneeze? All right, go ahead.
If a patient has a detailed plan for how to commit suicide so no one will catch them, and will catch them before it's complete, and has actually accumulated the tools that it takes to complete that act, would you ever, is that a sign that he is actively suicidal?
It is. It's a sign that they have gone beyond not just thinking about it, but actually having a plan and have begun acting on the plan.
And would that be consistent with simply malingering suicidality?
Objection, Your Honor, that's speculation. And it's not so rebuttal. And this witness is
I heard
already...
the question. I'm saying, rephrase that question.
How does having a detailed plan and the materials to carry it out differ from simply stating you're considering suicide or you're thinking about suicide?
Your Honor, I object.
What's the objection?
It's been asked and answered, and it's beyond the scope of sir rebuttal.
Sustained. Next question.
Would you agree that with testimony of the 2008 incident did not qualify as mania because it did not cause significant impairment in social or occupational functioning?
Objection, asked and answered.
I'm going to override objection. Answer that question if you can.
I would disagree for the reasons that I outlined before in terms of how many symptoms you can have and the fact that it does not necessarily have to impair functioning. It can be one of the criteria, but not necessarily.
Next question.
A statement like, when Hemy stated that he wanted to be on the cover of Forbes, and how would that differ between whether it was an evidence of mania versus simply a motivational statement?
Objection, asked and answered.
Sustained. As I said, the jury will ultimately make a decision on what they have and have not heard during the course of this trial. I'm going to sustain that one, though. Next question.
Is it true that manic people are always impulsive and engage in risky behavior and could not have planned the murder as we have seen here?
No, it is not true.
Do detailed differences between what Hemy told Dr. Crawford in 2011 and descriptions in Dr. Browning's report concern you?
No, they don't.
Objection as to the relevance of the witness's concern.
I'm going to sustain that objection. You want to rephrase that question about what concerns her?
Do those differences cause you to question your opinion or to question that perhaps he is malingering?
No, they do not. And part of the reason for that is because I recall asking Mr. Neumann one particular question this year that I asked him back in 2011, and the response was different. And when I asked him, it was a little different. And I said, well, which one was it? And he actually said to me, he said, well, it has to be the one from 2011 because that was closer to when it actually happened. So he himself recognizes that there's been some changes in sort of his memory for the last 5 years, and I think that's just a normal thing that we all experience. Memories change within 5 years.
Was he consistent between what he told you in 2011 and what he told Dr. Crawford in 2011?
It was. That was consistent as well as with what he also told Dr. Tracy Marks.
Does the fact that his speech was normal in the interview with the police suggest to you malingering?
No, it does not. And again, if we go back to that chart, what we've got is he was not presenting with that one symptom that I talked about with the racing thoughts. He was not presenting with that. And so he's presenting with some symptoms that are not necessarily going to be noticeable. So no, it does not mean malingering. It could also mean that he was presenting also at a period that was outside the window of when he was actually experiencing any manic episodes.
Do you know why Hemy might have said to the state's doctors, if a policeman was standing there, I would have done it?
Objection, speculation. Do you know why someone says something is clearly a speculation?
I heard you ask her, does Dr. Flores know why Mr. Neuman may have said a certain statement? Why is it
I can rephrase it to clarify. Is there a specific reason in your conversations with Hemy that might have led to that statement?
Yes.
I object, Your Honor. Again, that's speculation. If she wants to ask what the defendant told her, I don't have an objection to that question. But
Sustained. Next question.
Is there anything in your interview, did you address the question or the issue of if a policeman was standing there, would you have done it?
I did. I addressed it back in 2011, and I addressed it in 2016. When conducting an insanity evaluation, one of the things that's commonly known in the field is you ask if there were a police officer over your shoulder question. I asked him in 2011, and I asked him again in 2016. I think it was just probably within weeks of him seeing Dr. Browning and Dr. Huey, if I recall the correct dates.
You're familiar with Dr. Huey and Dr. Browning, correct?
I am.
And ultimately, what we have here is that your opinions differ, correct?
Yes.
Are there factors that you think go into that difference?
I do.
objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Are there differences in, do you see differences in your familiarity with the research as being an issue in this case?
Objection.
Sustained. Next question, please.
When you saw him in 2011, how he was then versus how he was now important in terms of what Dr. Browning and Dr. Huey could have seen?
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation as to what other individuals might have seen.
Sustained.
Was there something that was key in what you saw in 2011 that allows you to be confident in your opinion?
Objection, asked and answered.
Let me make sure I understood everyone straight. I heard the question, and you asked her, was there something key in what she may have observed in 2011? That was the question.
It was.
I also object that it's beyond the scope of Suicidal.
What's this something key?
I'm trying to keep.
Well, I understand that, but I want to sustain that objection. You want to rephrase that question?
Were you able to see in 2011 actual
Objection,
symptoms?
leading.
Sustain. She's also well straight. I'm going to over the sustained objection, but Counselor, you may explore, and I'm going to let I'm giving some latitude, but if you think the jury heard it, they probably did, so you may not necessarily need to ask that question. But the jury make the ultimate decision on what they did and did not hear. You may continue if you wish.
Is there, in your interview in 2011, is there a specific observation beyond what he told you, but a specific observation about Mr. Neuman that is key in your decision that would not be available in 2016?
Objection, Your
What's
Honor.
the objection?
Asked and answered. It's also beyond the scope of Suicidal.
I'm going to overrule that objection. I'm going to let her answer that question. Go ahead if you can.
Yes, there is. In 2011, when I interviewed him, there was clear indication that he still had some delusional thoughts, and his thinking presented as delusional. I tried to poke holes, I tried to challenge, and the way that his thought process was presenting is not something that can be easily malingered, not even by a mental health professional such as me. It's one of those things where when you see it, you know that it's real, you know that it's not faked. And because of how difficult it is to present with that type of illogical, irrational thinking, and having responses even when I was trying to poke holes and challenge. So what I saw in 2011 was a very powerful piece of data to me in informing me that, in fact, there was some veracity, there was a real illness that was present. I could actually see the symptom. And it was presenting not as all these other manic symptoms, but it was presenting actually as a delusion, which is a part of bipolar disorder.
And in the records that you reviewed, were you able to verify that others saw that?
Yes, I was. There was one other evaluator that
Do not
also.
object, Your Honor, to any testimony about what someone else observed.
Sustained.
At this point, is there anything in Dr. Browning's report that makes you question your diagnosis?
Objection, asked and answered.
Sustained. Next question, please.
Your Honor, at this point, I have no further questions.
All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're close to your next break with the Assistant Executive Board. I'm going to go ahead and give you a 10-minute break, and then we'll take that out and answer questions if it wishes in 10 minutes. Thank you, everyone.
All right. You may be seated.
you.